Captain Derek Hayes stood by the large window of his research ship and looked out at the purple clouds of gas and dust, floating in space, and he had been traveling through the darkness for 3 months now with his crew, and they had found nothing, except old stars that were dying slowly and rocks floating in the emptiness. His ship was called the Horizon's Edge. It was built for exploring new places in space and finding new things, but so far this trip had been very boring, and Derek was starting to think they should turn around and go back home to Earth. Then everything changed when Lieutenant Maya Collins called out from her station, and her voice was excited and nervous at the same time, and she said that the computers had picked up a strange signal coming from near some floating rocks. Derek walked over to her station and looked at the screens, and he could see there was indeed something there, and it looked like a ship. But it was not like any ship he had ever seen before, and the design was smooth and curved, like it had grown instead of being built by machines. Maya said the ship was sending out a distress call, and the message was in a language that their computers did not know, but there was also a special code mixed in with the words, and that code was one that every space-traveling species used to ask for help without fighting. Derek thought about it for a moment, and then he made his decision, and he told his crew to get ready because they were going to see if anyone on that ship needed their assistance, and Maya nodded and began preparing the docking systems. While other crew members got their suits ready, when they flew close to the strange ship, Derek could see it better through the windows. And the outside of the vessel seemed to be covered in something that looked almost alive, and there were patterns that glowed with soft blue and green lights, and the whole thing reminded him of a forest at night back on Earth. They connected there. Shipped to the alien vessel, and Derek put on his protective suit and took 3 other crew members with him, and they walked through the connecting tunnel and entered the strange ship, and immediately Derek noticed the air smelled like rain and flowers, which was very unexpected. The inside of the ship was even stranger than the outside, and the walls seemed to pulse with light like a heartbeat, and there were vine-like structures growing along the ceiling and floor, and everything had a soft glow to it that made Derek feel like he was walking through a dream. They moved deeper into the ship, following the source of the distress signal, and finally they came to a large round room at the center of the vessel, and what Derek saw there made him stop walking completely. There was a woman sitting in the middle of the room, and she was the most beautiful and unusual person Derek had ever seen in his entire life. Her skin had a strange quality to it that made it seem to shimmer and glow like moonlight reflecting off water, and her hair was long and silver white, and it moved even though there was no wind in the room, and it seemed to float around her head. Like she was underwater, her ears were pointed and swept back in a way that no human ears did, and her eyes were large and colored a deep purple with tiny flecks of gold scattered through them like stars, and when she looked up at Derek, he felt like she was looking into his soul. She wore armor that seemed to be made from the same living material as the ship, and it changed colors slowly from green to blue to purple as he watched, and the armor covered her body but left her arms bare, and Derek could see her skin had the same shimmering quality everywhere. But what really made Derek freeze in place was the creature lying next to the woman. It was a dragonaut, a story dragon, or a myth dragon, but a real living, breathing dragon that was about the size of a large dog, and its scales were pure black and shiny like polished stone, and its eyes glowed with an amber color that seemed to burn with inner fire. The dragon lifted its head when Derek and his crew entered, and it made a low rumbling sound in its chest that made Derek think of distant thunder, and he could feel the vibration of that sound in his bones. Woman spoke, and her voice was musical and strange, and Derek could not understand the words, but his translator device began working immediately, and after a few seconds it started producing broken fragments of meaning, and he heard words like lost and betrayed and war. Follows. Derek raised both his hands to show he was not carrying any weapons, and he tried to speak in a calm voice, and he said that his name was Derek Hayes, and that he and his crew had received the distress call, and they had come to offer help if it was needed. The woman studied him with those incredible purple eyes, and Derek found himself speaking again without really meaning to, and the words just came out of his mouth, and he said that she was beautiful and that he had never seen anyone like her before. It was the truth, and Derek could not help saying it, because even though he knew there might be danger here, and even though the dragon was watching him with those burning eyes, he still had to acknowledge what he was seeing, and this woman was something beyond anything in his experience. The woman's expression changed when she heard his words, and a smile appeared on her face, but it was not a happy smile, and instead, it seemed sad and knowing, like she had heard those exact words before and they had brought her nothing but pain and trouble. She stood up slowly and gracefully, and the dragon stood up with her. And Derek noticed that the creature moved in perfect coordination with the woman, like they were two parts of the same being. The woman walked to the door of the chamber and she touched it with her hand, and the door, which had been opened, suddenly closed, and it sealed shut with a wet sound that made Derek think of living flesh closing over a wound. Maya's voice came through Derek's communication device, and she sounded worried, and she said that they had just lost visual contact with Derek and his team, and the ship seemed to be closing itself off, and she asked if they should try to force the door open. The woman raised her hand, and suddenly Derek's communication device made a popping sound and went completely dead, and now he and his team were cut off from the horizon's edge with no way to call for help. The woman spoke again, and this time her words were in English, and her voice was clear and perfect, and she said that she understood his language now because the translator had taught her. And then she said something that made Derek's blood run cold. She said that Derek should not have said those words to her. Derek tried to explain that he meant no offense and that he was just being honest, but the woman laughed. It was a bitter sound, and she said that offense was not the problem. She began to walk in a slow circle around Derek while the dragon followed her like a shadow, and she explained that the last person who had complimented her appearance had been named Kairos the Deceiver, and he had looked kind and curious, just like Derek did now. The woman said her name was Alara Moonwhisper, and she was the last daughter of a place called Silverus Prime, and the dragon was named Nyx, and they were bonded together like sisters. Then Alara said something that made Derek understand how much danger they were all in, and she said that the war she had been running from had now followed her here, and his innocent compliment had activated an ancient trap. She explained that her ship was now broadcasting her location across space, and every hunter and every soldier and every weapon that the Kairosian Empire had sent to find her would now know exactly where she was. Asked if his crew could help her fight whatever was coming, but Alara laughed again, and she said that humans had only recently learned to travel between stars, and the Kairosian Empire had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. She asked Derek why she should let him and his crew get involved in a war they could not possibly win, and Derek felt anger rising in his chest, and he demanded to know why she had locked the door if humans were so useless. Alara stopped walking and looked directly at him, and the dragon called Nyx growled, and smoke began to curl from her nostrils, and Derek could feel the heat even from several feet away. Alara said quietly that Derek and his crew were about to become casualties of a war they did not understand, and she could not bring herself to let innocent people die without at least trying to explain what was about to happen to them. Outside, sealed chamber alarms began to sound through the horizon's edge, and Derek could hear Maya's panicked voice coming through on the external speakers, and she was shouting that multiple ships had just appeared in the system. Maya said the new ships were massive and covered in weapons, and they were all heading straight toward the horizon's edge at high speed. Alara closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they were glowing with an inner light that was both beautiful and terrifying, and she said that the enemy had arrived and the war had begun. She looked at Derek with an expression that mixed sadness and determination, and she said that his compliment had just made him part of a story that would either end with his species achieving their first real victory or with their complete destruction. Derek felt fear spreading through his body, but he also felt something else, and that was determination, and he had not come all this way into space just to give up when things got difficult. He looked at Alara and at Nyx, and he said that if war was coming, then his crew would fight, and maybe humans were new to space travel, but they were not new to fighting for survival. Alara studied him for a long moment, and then slowly that sad smile returned to her face, and she said that perhaps there was hope after all, and perhaps this time things would be different. Ship shuddered as the chamber shook again as another blast hit Alara's ship from outside, and Derek stumbled, but Lara remained perfectly still and balanced, as if the impact had not affected her at all, and the dragon Nyx spread her wings wide and hissed at the Galara said that Derek's crew was brave because they were trying to position their ship between her vessel and the attacking fleet, and she said it was foolish, but also brave, and Derek could hear something like respect in her voice. Derek said that humans did not abandon people who needed help, and that was what made them different, and what made them human. Alara replied that such thinking would get them all killed. Very quickly then, she waved her hand, and the walls of the chamber became transparent like glass, and Derek gasped at what he saw outside in space. There were ships everywhere, and dozens of them, and each one was as large as a small city back on Earth, and they were covered in weapons that glowed with red light, and all of them were moving toward the horizons, Alara said. These were the ships of the Kyrosian Empire, and she began to tell Derek her story, and her voice was filled with old pain. She said that 14 years ago the Empire had come to her world, and they had offered trade and knowledge and friendship, and their leader Kairos had come in person, and he was a diplomat who spoke beautiful words. Skyros had told Alara that she was beautiful and special, and he had spent months earning the trust of her people, and the dragon Nyx made a sound like breaking glass, which Derek understood was the sound of grief. Alara continued her story and said that during a great festival when every city on her planet was celebrating their new alliance with the Empire, something terrible happened. The Empire activated hidden weapons that they had placed inside the gifts they had given to Ilara's people, and these weapons turned the very air of her planet into poison, and within hours billions of her people died. Her voice became empty and hollow as she described how her people had suffocated in the same air that had given them life for 1,000,000 years. Derek felt sick to his stomach, and he asked, well, how Alara had survived such a horrible thing. Alara touched her chest and said that she had not survived, and the person she had been before that night had died along with her world. And what had survived was something different. She explained that she and Nyx had bonded together in desperation and rage on that terrible night, and they had become something new, and something that the Empire feared. Asked why the Empire was hunting her so desperately, and Alara's smile was terrifying to see. She said that on the night her world died, she and Nyx had discovered something the Empire had been hiding for 10,000 years, and that secret was that the Empire could be beaten and could be killed. And now Alara knew exactly how to do it. Another blast struck the ship, and Maya's voice came through the external speakers again, and she said that the attacking ships were demanding that Derek and Alara surrender or the horizons edge would be destroyed. Derek tried to use his communication device, but Alara touched his wrist, and suddenly his voice was being transmitted to every ship in the area, including all the enemy vessels Alara spoke through Derek's device, and her words carried across space with impossible clarity, and she announced her full name and said that she was the daughter of Silverus Prime and the witness to genocide. She said that the Kyrosian Empire had chased her across 1,000 light years and had destroyed every place that had offered her shelter, and had murdered innocent people simply because they had tried to help her. The enemy ships seemed to pause, and their weapons were still charged, but they held their fire as if waiting. Alara continued speaking and said that this time was different because Derek had offered her kindness without knowing the cost, and his species knew nothing about the war or the history or the hatred between Alara and the Empire. She said that humans were innocent of any Crimea. Voice responded, and it came through all the communication channels, and it was cold and mechanical. And it said that innocence was not relevant, and that Derek and his crew should surrender Alara, and then they might be allowed to levy Alara. Laughed at this, and said that the Empire had taught her what their promises were worth, because they had promised her people peace right before murdering them. The voice said that Alara's defiance changed nothing about the situation, but Alara disagreed, and said that it changed everything because she had spent 14 years learning the Empire's secrets and mapping their weaknesses and preparing for this exact moment. She said that now she was going to teach humanity what the Empire really was, and she was going to give humans the weapon that the Empire feared most. The voice asked what weapon she meant, and for the first time it sounded uncertain. Alara said the weapon was knowledge. She turned to Derek and said that she was going to unlock the door and his crew was going to connect their ship fully with hers, and then she would show all of them something that would make them targets for the rest of their lives, she told Derek that he could refuse and could run away, and she would not blame him for that choice. Derek looked out at the enemy ships surrounding them, and he could see the horizon's edge floating there with his crew inside, trusting him to make the right decision. He asked Alara if the Empire would destroy them anyway, even if they ran. Alara said yes without hesitation. Derek asked if staying meant that humans would become part of this war again. Alara said yes. Derek took a deep breath and made his choice, and he said that they would stay, but that humans would not just be shields for Alara. And if she was going to drag humanity into this war, then she would have to teach them how to fight back for the first time. Alara smiled with real warmth and said that Derek's answer was exactly what she had hoped to hear them. Dragon Nix's eyes began to glow brighter, and suddenly the chamber filled with light and images appeared in the air, showing star maps and technical information and data that made Derek's head hurt. Alara explained that what Derek was seeing was the location of every Kyrosian military base within 500 light years, and their supply lines and their shipyards and their weapon storage facilities. Most importantly, she showed him an image of a massive structure orbiting a red giant star. She said this was the throne world where Kairos himself lived, believing that he was safe and untouchable. Derek said that Alara must be insane if she wanted to attack the Empire's capital world. Alara corrected him and said that she did not just want to attack it, and she wanted to destroy the entire Empire, and Derek was going to help her do it. Shay explained that if they did not act, then the Empire would eventually follow her trail to Earth, and Derek's homeworld had 4 billion people living on it, and Alara's homeworld had held 6 billion people before the Empire killed them. Alara did not need to finish her sentence, because Derek understood what she meant, and the Empire would do to Earth exactly what they had done to Silverus Prime. The enemy fleet opened fire with all their weapons at once, and the real battle began. Alara said that Derek should hold on tight, and the walls of the ship rippled and twisted, and Derek felt reality itself bending around them. One moment they were surrounded by enemy fire, and the next moment they were 3,000 kilometers away, watching the Empire's ships fire at empty space where they had just been. Derek said this was impossible because human scientists had theories about moving through space like that, but the energy needed was far too great. Alara explained that the energy came from Nyx, because shadow dragons did not breathe normal fire, and instead they breathed something called quantum energy. Said this was why the Empire had hunted shadow dragons until they were extinct, or at least almost extinct, and she looked at Nyx with sadness through the transparent walls. Derek watched the enemy ships turn and begin searching for them with their sensors, and the horizon's edge was still trapped between the enemy and empty space. Derek shouted for Maya to get the ship out of danger, but Maya replied that enemy tractor beams had locked onto the horizon's edge, and the engines were at full power, but the ship was not moving. Jalara said that the Empire was using the same technology they had used on her homeworld, and it was an energy dampening field that prevented ships from escaping. Derek asked if Alara could break the field. Alara said that she could, but it would reveal a secret she had been keeping hidden, and once the Empire saw what she and Nyx truly were, they would never stop hunting them. Derek grabbed Alara's shoulder and made her look at him, and he said that his crew was dying, and whatever secret she was protecting was not worth their lives. Lara stared at him, and Derek could see the weight of 14 years of running and hiding and loneliness in her eyes, and then she nodded. She called to Nyx and said that it was time to show the Empire what they really were there. Dragon threw back her head and roared, but this was not a normal sound, and it was deeper than sound and more fundamental than language, and Derek felt it vibrating in his bones and his blood. Then Nyx began to grow. She expanded like a star being born, and her form shifted from the size of a dog to the size of a horse, and then a vehicle, and then a building. And within seconds, she was as large as a battleship. Her wings spread out, and they stretched for kilometers, and her scales reflected the starlight. Like black mirrors, Derek whispered that this was impossible. Leela explained that shadow dragons were the first species to achieve consciousness in the galaxy, and they had shaped nebulae and sung stars into being, and the Empire feared them because a fully mature shadow. The battle that was happening should have ended in seconds, because the horizon's edge was just a research ship with very few weapons, and it was facing a fleet that had conquered many civilizations across the galaxy, but Alara's ship, which she called the Last Star, was not an ordinary vessel at all. Alara told everyone to hold on tight, and the organic walls of the ship rippled like water, and Derek felt reality twisting around them in a way that made his stomach turn. One moment they were sitting in space, surrounded by enemy weapons fire, and the next moment they were 3,000 kilometers away. They were watching the Empire's fleet fire at empty space where they had just been. Alara explained that this was called phase shift drive, and the Empire had developed it to make sure they could always escape from their crimes, but she and Nyx had stolen the technology. Derek said this was impossible because humans. Scientists had theories about phase shifting, but the amount of energy needed was too great for any human technology to produce. Said that the energy requirements were met by a bonded dragon's flame, and she explained that shadow dragons did not breathe normal fire, but instead breathed quantum energy, she said. This was why the Empire had hunted shadow dragons until they were extinct, or at least until they thought they were extinct, and she glanced at Nyx with a sad expression through the transparent walls. Derek could see the enemy fleet turning around and searching with their sensors, and the horizon's edge was still trapped there, caught between the enemy ships and empty space. Derek shouted into his communication device for Maya to get the ship out of danger. Maya's voice came back strained and worried, and she said she was working on it, but enemy tractor beams had locked onto the horizon's edge and the engines were running at full power, but the ship was not moving. At Alara closed her eyes and said that the Empire was using the same technique they had used on Silvery's Prime, and it was an energy-dampening field that prevented ships from fleeing. Derek asked if Alara could break the field. Alara said that she could, but it would reveal something she had kept hidden, and once the Empire saw what Nyx and she truly were, they would not stop until they had destroyed every world between here. At the edge of the galaxy, Eric grabbed Alara's shoulder and forced her to look at him. Atisa said that his crew was dying out there, and whatever secret she was protecting was not worth their lives. Lara stared at him, and for a moment, Lezeo saw the weight of 14 years of survival and loss and loneliness so profound it changed her very soul, and then she nodded her head. She whispered to Nyx and told the dragon to show the Empire what they really were. The dragon threw back her head and roared, but this was not an ordinary sound at all, and it was deeper than sound, and more fundamental than any language. And Derek felt it in his bones, in his blood, in his very cells. And then Nyx began to grow large. Joshi expanded like a dark star being born, and her form shifted from the size of a wolf to that of a horse, and then a truck, and then a building, and within she was the size of a battleship. Her wings spread out and they stretched for kilometers across space, and her scales reflected the starlight like black mirrors that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Derek could only whisper that this was impossibly said that shadow dragons were the first species to achieve consciousness in the entire galaxy, and they had shaped nebulae into nurseries for younger races, and they had sunk stars into being. She said the Empire feared them because a fully mature shadow dragon did not obey the laws of physics, but instead rewrote those laws according to their will. The massive head of Nyx turned toward the enemy fleet, and her eyes, which were now the size of houses, burned with ancient fury that had been building for 14 years. Laroque continued explaining, and her voice now echoed with two tones together, hers and Nyx's, perfectly synchronized, and she said that such power required a bond where two souls became one. She said that maintaining this bond was slowly killing her. Derek realized the truth and said that Alara was die. Delara confirmed this quietly and said that every time Nyx grew to this size, Alara faded a little more, and in a year, or maybe two, there would not be enough of her left to maintain the bond. She said that when that happened, Nyx would become fully real and fully physical, but also fully alone. Again the dragon's roar shook space itself, and the enemy tractor beams holding the horizon's edge shattered like glass, and the human ship lurched free from the trap. A new voice transmitted across all the communication frequencies, and this one was different from before, and it was older and colder and dripping with hatred. The voice said that it was Grand Admiral Vex of the Eternal Throne, and it was authorizing something called Protocol Extinction. The voice commanded that every ship destroy the dragon and destroy the elf and destroy every human vessel in the sector. And it said that no witnesses should be allowed to survive. The entire fleet opened fire with everything they had, and there were energy beams that could crack planets and missiles that carried antimatter warheads and gravity weapons that could collapse stars, and all of it was focused on the giant form of Nyx the dragon, spread her wings wide, and sang her response reality. Fractured around them, and the missiles simply ceased to exist as their atoms were scattered across dimensional boundaries, and the energy beams bent and curved back toward the ships that had fired them. The gravity weapons created miniature black holes, but Nyx swallowed them like a whale swallowing tiny fish. Derek said that Alara was winning the battle, but Alara said no, and her voice was grim, and she explained that she was dying faster than before, and this giant form of Nyx could only exist for minutes before Alara burned out completely. She said that when she was gone, Nyx would become vulnerable, and the Empire knew this, and they were just stalling and waiting for Alara to collapse. Derek's mind raced, trying to find a solution, and he remembered that Alara had said dragons bonded with other species, and he asked if Nyx could bond with humans. Alara stared at him with surprise in her eyes, and she said that the bonding process was intimate and painful, and it required absolute trust and synchronization of thought. She said that most species could not survive the bonding process. Eric asked again if it was possible for humans. Alara admitted that theoretically it was possible, but even if Derek's crew survived the bonding, they did not have the knowledge needed to fight the Kyre. Derek said that Alara had that knowledge because she had been studying the Empire for 14 years, and he told her to bond that knowledge to his crew and make humans into her weapons. Alara warned that doing this would make humans into targets forever. He shouted back that they were already targets, and he gestured at the battle raging outside. Said that Alara herself had told him the Empire would come to Earth next, and it was better to fight them now with help than to wait and die. Alone, ladder. Alara looked at Nyx, and the dragon looked back at her, and Derek saw the conversation happening between them without any words being spoken. Finally, Alara nodded, said that if they did this, then humanity would stop being innocent, and humans would carry the burden of knowledge that the Empire had spent 10,000 years trying to suppress. Said that humans would become what she was, which was witnesses that must be silenced. Derek said that then humans and Alara would be witnesses together. Smiled, and this time the smile reached her eyes, and she said that Maya Collins, the lieutenant and navigator, would be first. Derek asked why Maya Specificalular, said that Maya had already tried to hack into the last stars systems 3 times since they had met, and she had kept the Horizon's Edge alive against impossible odds. She said that Maya's brain patterns resonated at a frequency that was compatible with Dragon Song, and that made her a natural candidate. The last star phase shifted again, and this time it appeared directly next to the Horizon's Edge. Edric spoke into his communication device and said that he needed to speak to Lieutenant Maya Collins. When Maya responded, Derek asked her how she would like to learn to fly a dragon in the command center of the Horizon's Edge. Maya Collins stared at her captain's image on the screen, and then looked at the impossible dragon filling her viewport, and then back at her captain. Again, she asked very carefully if Derek had been exposed to alien drugs that were affecting his mind. Derek laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh since this nightmare had begun, and he told Maya to just trust him. He said that when the door opened, she should walk through it, and whatever happened, she should not scream when the dragon talked to her. Maya asked if the dragon actually talked. Alara's voice came through the communication system and said that she preferred singing to talking, and she told Maya that she was about to become the first human dragon rider in history. Alara said that Maya should try not to die because Alara had grown somewhat fond of the human species. The membrane door of the last star opened, and Maya stood at the airlock of the Horizon's Edge with her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, the enemy fleet was regrouping, and their weapons were charging for another assault. Ahead of her, an elf and a dragon were offering something impossible. Maya took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway. War had just found its first human soldier willing to fight. Maya Collins had imagined many ways she might die in space over the years, and suffocation and radiation and explosive decompression were all hazards that came with exploring the unknown. The bonding process completed with a sensation that felt like lightning striking directly down Maya's spine, and she gasped for air, and when she opened her eyes again, she could see things she had never noticed before in her entire life. She could see the quantum foam that existed underneath reality itself, and she could see the dimensional frequencies that Ilara's ship used to phase shift through space. And she could see the energy signatures of every ship in the Kyrosian fleet. Maya breathed out and said that she could see their weak points. Now she explained that every enemy ship had a harmonic resonance in its power core, and if they could hit those cores at exactly the right frequency, then something would happen. LR finished Maya's sentence and said that the ships would explode from the inside, and she explained that this was what she had discovered in her 14th year of running from the Empire. She said that this secret was what made her too dangerous to let live. Nyx sang again, and this time Maya understood what the dragon was saying, and Nyx was shrinking down from her massive form and condensing herself back to something more manageable. But instead of returning to her original wolf size, the dragon split into two forms, and part of her remained with Ilara, while another part that was smaller but no less real materialized. Right next to Maya, the new dragon was the size of a large dog, and her scales were midnight blue instead of the obsidian black of the original, and her eyes were the same amber color, but they flickered with Maya's own determination and will. Maya said that she did not understand what was happening. Glara explained that Nyx was the last shadow dragon in existence, but she was also the mother of a new generation, and every human who bonded with her created a fragment, which was a child dragon that carried both dragon and human traits. Ilara said that Maya was not just a rider, but also a parent to this new. Maya stared at the small dragon, who made a chirping sound that was almost cute, and the creature nuzzled Maya's hand with her snout. The scales felt warm and alive, like touching pure potential energy. Maya said that the Empire would kill her for this. Ilara agreed and said that they would certainly try, but now Maya knew how to kill them back. Derek's voice crackled through the communication system, asking for Maya's status and saying that the enemy fleet was moving again and preparing for another attack. Maya looked at Ilara and at the massive Nyx and at her own small dragon, who had already crawled up her arm to perch on her shoulder. Maya reported that her status was operational and that she had a plan. But it was going to require something crazy, Eric asked. If it was crazier than bonding with the dragon, Maya said it was much crazier, and she explained that Derek needed to broadcast a message to every human colony within communication range. She said he needed to tell them what happened here and tell them about Silverus Prime and the Empire's true nature and the harvest that was coming. Derek said that doing that would cause mass panic across human space. Maya countered that it could also cause mass preparation, and she said that the Empire's greatest weapon was secrecy. She explained that the Empire harvested species before those species realized they were in danger, but if humans warned everyone and spread the knowledge that Ilara had gathered, then they would not just save Earth, they would save every species that was in the Empire's crosshairs. There was silence on the communication channel, and then Derek said that doing this would make humans responsible for starting an interstellar war. Maya said that humans did not start this war, and they were just the first ones to realize it had been happening all along. She asked how many other species the Empire had harvested, and said it might be hundreds or thousands of civilizations that had died thinking they were just unlucky and never knowing they were murdered for fuel. More silence followed, and then Derek's voice came back heavy with the weight of his decision. He asked Ilara if Maya was right, and if spreading the truth would stop the Imperial. Ilara closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice carried thousands of years of sorrow. She said that the Kyrosian Empire had ruled through fear and ignorance for 10,000 years, and they had convinced the galaxy that they were invincible and that resistance was futile. She said that she had seen their records and their internal communications, and they were terrified of one thing, which was unified opposition. Said that if enough species learned the truth and banded together, then things would change. Derek finished her thought and said that the farmers would become the Hanta Dala. Said exactly. Derek made his decision and said that they would broadcast everything to every colony and every outpost and every ship in human space. He said they would make sure the message kept broadcasting and kept spreading until every sentient species in the galaxy knew what the Empire really was. Loara. Warned that this would destroy whatever peace existed, Derek shot back that there was no peace and there was just a slaughterhouse, where the cattle had not realized what was happening yet, and he said it was better to fight. Maya felt her small dragon, who she decided to name. Nova pulsed with approval, and through their bond she could sense the original Nyx's agreement. Maya said that they should give everyone something to fight with, and she told Alara that she needed to learn everything Alara knew. Shay said she needed every weakness and every tactic and every piece of stolen technology, and then she needed to teach it all. To her, Krulara said that it would take weeks to transfer all that information. Maya countered that they had only minutes, but Nyx could accelerate the process. She asked if the dragon could create multiple fragments and bond with her entire crew, and transfer the knowledge simultaneously. Said that doing that would strain Nyx to her breaking point, and she said that Nyx was already near exhaustion from the battle. She said that if Nyx split herself further into more fragments, then something bad would happen. The voice of Nyx filled everyone's minds, and it was not words but pure meaning made clear, and Nyx said that she would die. She said that the mother form would fade completely, but the fragments would live on, and the children would carry her memories and her strength. Nyx said that this was how shadow dragons were always meant to reproduce, which was by sacrifice. She said no very firmly, and said that she would not lose Nyx. But Nyx responded gently and said that Alara had lost her 14 years ago, when Silverus Prime burned. Nyx said that the dragon Alara had known died with that world, and what remained now was vengeance. Given physical form, she said that Alara should let her become something better, and let her become hope. Instead of revenge, Maya felt tears on her face, and she realized that some of them were her own tears and some were Alara's tears, flowing simultaneously through their shared connection. Through the bond, Maya understood what Nyx was offering, which was not just knowledge or power, but legacy. Nyx wanted to give the last shadow dragon away to become thousands or millions of dragons and create a species reborn through human hosts. Maya said quietly that if they did this, then humanity would become something different, and they would not just be humans anymore. Agreed, and said that humans would be something new, which was both human and dragon at the same time. Shay said they would be the first true hybrid species in all of Galactic history. Maya asked what would happen with the Imperial. Smiled through her tears and said that the Empire would fear the new hybrid species and would hunt them and would try to destroy them before they could spread, but she said they would fail. Maya asked why the Empire would fail. Alara said it was because humans would have something the Empire did not expect, which was each other. She explained that the Empire conquered by isolating species and making them believe they were alone in the universe. But humans had something special, which was that they formed packs and tribes and alliances, and they did not abandon their own. She said that if you added dragon bond loyalty to human stubbornness, then you would create something that was unstoppable. Kyrosian fleet fired their main weapons, and massive beams of concentrated energy that could burn through moon-sized asteroids struck the last star's shields. The organic barrier absorbed energy that should have vaporized them instantly. Maya said that the enemy was testing their limits, and the next attack would use overwhelming force. She said they were going to try to crack the ship open and vent everyone into space. Derek's voice came through, said that he was bringing the horizons edge. Alongside Annie asked Maya what she needed. Maya looked at Alara and at Nyx and at little Nova perched on her shoulder, singing softly. She said that she needed 10 minutes and everyone on both ships who was willing to bond. Then she asked Derek if he was ready for humanity to go to war decks. Response was immediate, and he said that he had been in space for 15 years and had seen nebulae and pulsars and the birth of stars. He said he thought he knew what wonder was, but this moment of watching Maya talk to dragons and seeing the truth about humanity's place in the universe was the most important moment in human history. Said that yes, he was ready, and they all were ready, and they all were ready. Maya commanded him to open the airlocks and said that it was time to create an army. She said that then they were going to teach the Kyrosian Empire what happened when the Harvest decided to fight back. Nyx began to glow, and her form started splitting like a cell dividing, and she created dozens and then hundreds of small dragons. Each one carried a fragment of her consciousness and her memories and her strength. Grand Admiral Vex's voice crackled across all frequencies, and he said that this was impossible because those shields were supposed to be impenetrable and the power cores were protected by the best technology. Amaya interrupted him by commandeering the communication channel using dragon-enhanced technology, and she said that the shields were protected by physics. She said that dragons did not obey physics but instead rewrote the rules. She asked if Vex thought that Alara was alone in knowing the Empire's weaknesses, and she said that every bonded human now carried that knowledge. She said that they were broadcasting everything to every human colony within communication range. Vex snarled and said that they were condemning their entire species, and that the Empire would burn every human world until nothing remained. Derek cut in and asked Vex what would happen when the Empire ran out of fuel. Said that the Empire got fuel from harvesting species like humanity, and he asked how long the Empire could function without that fuel. He explained what was going to happen next, and he said that they were not just broadcasting to human colonies, but to every species the Empire had ever harvested and every world the Empire had ever heard. Atakti said that Alara had their coordinates and humans had their communication frequencies, and by the time this battle ended, the entire galaxy would know what the Empire really was. There was silence on the communication channel, and then Vex asked grudgingly what humans wanted. Derek said that they wanted a head start, and he said that the Empire was going to let both human ships leave this system. He said that Vex was going to watch as they jumped to Earth and began preparing their defenses. He said that the Empire would hesitate for just a moment, wondering if attacking humanity was worth revealing themselves to every other species in the galaxy. Vex promised that they would destroy humanity eventually, no matter what. Derek agreed that maybe the Empire would succeed eventually, but he asked how many of their ships humans would take with them. He asked how many other species would rise up while the Empire was distracted hunting humans. He asked how long the Empire could survive when the truth was spreading across the galaxy. The Kyrosian fleet held their position with weapons charged, but they were not firing any. Mormaya said that the enemy was calculating and trying to determine if humans were bluffing about the broadcast. Derek said that they should show the Empire they were not bluffing, and he ordered all crew to prepare for simultaneous jump. He asked Alara if her ship could make it back to Earth. Alara admitted that she did not know because she was nearly gone, and the ship was part of her, and when she faded, the ship might failed. Dr. Park interrupted and said that they could merge the ships permanently. She had been working frantically at a console, and her dragon named Spark was perched beside her, manipulating holographic displays with its tail. Park explained that the last star was organic, but the horizon's edge was mechanical, and if they used dragon fire to fuse them together, they could create a hybrid vessel. Maya warned that they would lose both ships in the process, but Park countered that they might create something new instead, which would be a ship that was part human technology and part Silverus technology and part Shadow Dragon. She said it would be something the Empire had never seen before. Laura laughed weakly and said that they wanted to turn her into a ship and make her actually become a vessel. She said it would be the first living human-elf dragon ship in all of history. Eric asked if it would work. Park said cheerfully that it might kill all of them, and the energy requirements alone were staggering. Maya finished the thought and said that the energy would be met by 43 dragons singing in perfect harmony. She said that through the bond she could feel that the dragons wanted this because they wanted to become something permanent that would outlast their individual forms. Nix's voice filled everyone's minds, and she said that this was how shadow dragons were always meant to ascend. She said it was not supposed to happen alone, but bonded with other species and becoming greater than the sum of all parts. She said that she had been alone for 14 years, and she was tired of being alone. Derek made his decision and said that they would do. I told Park to coordinate with Maya and ordered everyone else to prepare for the merge. He said that somebody should tell the Kyrosian fleet that they were about to witness history being made. Process was both agony and ecstasy combined into one overwhelming experiences. 43 dragons sang their harmonics, began breaking down the barriers between the ships and between different species and between life and machine. The hull of the horizon's edge rippled and became organic like living tissue. The walls of the last star hardened and took on metallic qualities like steel. Lara screamed as her physical body dissolved completely, but it was not death that she was experiencing, it was transformation instead. Her consciousness expanded outward and merged with both ships and with Nyx, and with every bonded human aboard the vessels for a brief moment. They were all one being, which was a hive mind of unprecedented complexity, and power. Then the merge completed fully, and they separated again into individuals, but they were individuals who now shared something profound and permanent. They existed as separate beings, but part of them would always be connected and always aware of each other's presence. And the ship itself was alive now. It called itself Horizon Star, and it sang with a voice that shook the fabric of space itself, where the horizon's edge had been sleek and functional, and the last star had been organic and flowing. The new Horizon Star was both of these things, and neither of them at the same time. It was a living starship that could think and feel and dream like a personal Lara's voice resonated through every bulkhead, in every corridor, in every atom of the vessel. Shay said that she was the ship now, and she was the crew, and she was human and elf and dragon, all combined. She said that she was vengeance, but she was also hope for the future. She said that she was Alara, and she was home. The Arosian fleet fired everything they had in one desperate final salvo. Hundreds of weapons unleashed their destructive power simultaneously, and it was enough energy to crack a small moon into pieces. But the Horizon Star did not try to dodge the attack. It did not raise defensive shields either. Instead, it simply sang in response. Harmonics deflected every shot that came at them and bent every energy beam away and neutralized every missile before it could detonate. Then, with a single thought that was shared by all 43 bonded pairs simultaneously, the Horizon Star fired back at the enemy, but it did not fire with weapons. It fired with knowledge instead. Transmission burst from the ship at speeds faster than light, and it was carried on quantum frequencies that could not be blocked or stopped. The transmission contained everything that Alara had learned over 14 years, which included every detail of the harvest and every murdered species and every lie the Empire had told it spread like a virus, infecting communication networks across 1,000 light-years of space. Within hours, it would reach 1 million different worlds. Within days, it would reach 1 billion planets. The truth would spread faster than the Empire could possibly silence it. Vex said that humans had doomed themselves, but his voice lacked conviction. Now Derek replied, and his words emerged from the Horizon Star itself, because he was part of the ship now. He said that they had not doomed themselves, but had doomed the Empire instead. He said that the galaxy was going to wake up, and when it did, it was going to be very angry at what it learned. The Kyrosian fleet turned and began to retreat from the battle. They did not jump away immediately, but retreated slowly with their weapons still charged, as if they expected the humans to pursue them. But the Horizon Star let them go without attacking. Maya said that the enemy would be back someday. Agreed, and said that of course they would return with more ships and more weapons and more desperation. Lieutenant Chris Moore, who was new to the Dragon Bond and still adjusting to having a green-scaled dragon named Echo chirping in his thoughts, said that they had won the battle. Derek corrected him and said that they had survived, which was different from winning. He said that winning would come later when they reached Earth and warned the people there, prepared every human world for the war that was approaching. Dr. Park asked what would happen when the war finally. Camilara's voice answered from all around them, because she was the ship now, and she said that they would fight. She said it would not just be humans fighting, but every species. The Empire had threatened over the millennia. She said they would form an alliance, which would be a coalition of all the harvested species working together. She said they would make the Empire pay for every single life they had taken. More protested and said that such a war could take centuries to complete. Maya said simply that then they would fight for centuries because dragons lived for thousands of years. She said that now humans live that long too, because of the bond through the viewport. Earth came into view, and it looked like a blue marble that seemed impossibly peaceful and ignorant of the approaching doom. Derek ordered the ship to take them home at full speed. He said that they had a planet to prepare and a species to warn. He said that the Kyrosian Empire had 10,000 years of history behind them. He said that humans would show the Empire what humanity could accomplish with just one generation of dragon rage and determination. The Horizon star accelerated toward Earth, and behind it, in the space it left, there were 43 sets of